I have to make a confession. Very often on this channel I say a sentence that's not entirely true. I say the following. I repeatedly stated that crypto is highly correlated. Whenever Bitcoin or Ethereum goes up, then the altcoins go up as well and vice versa. When Bitcoin crashes, the altcoins come crashing down as well. But it is a bit more nuanced than that. Because the high correlation would imply that diversification, that buying a lot of different crypto assets isn't really useful, that you can't really spread your risk by buying several altcoins. That's the implication of high correlation. And on the face of it, this seems to be true. Look at this behind me. This is a crypto bubble chart. It shows for today what's the performance of the top 100 cryptocurrencies. And doesn't this look like high correlation? Everything is red at the same time. Now, when we zoom out and we look at the entire year, that tends to reverse, right? Pretty much everything is green here. Again, because Bitcoin went up by 150% in the last year. But here's the problem with that statement. Correlation is high for the larger assets. It's actually not that high once we go down the rabbit hole. The smaller your individual altcoin is, the less it tends to be correlated with the entire market. And this can be seen both right now in the current market size. So we just look at the smaller altcoins, but it can also be seen over time. For example, let's have a look at the correlation of Ethereum to Bitcoin over time. That correlation measured in a 90 days interval is described in the chart behind me. But let me first explain what this means. Again, correlation is a measure of how much two assets move in tandem with one another, right? Do they always move in the same direction, or do they maybe move sometimes in opposite directions, right? If correlation is high, they always move in the same direction. This means the correlation coefficient is very close to 1. Now, if they don't move that much in tandem with one another, they simply just randomly move against each other, then the correlation coefficient is 0. Now, if they tend to move in exact opposite directions at the same time, so asset A goes up and asset B tends to go down, then we've got negative correlation. Then the maximum for that correlation coefficient is -1. The correlation coefficient moves from +1, highly correlated, to -1, negatively correlated, and 0 being completely independent to one another. Here are the videos that work on YouTube. XRP will be $12,000 guaranteed, or an AI explosion, top 3 cryptos to buy in November. A lot of pushing of greed, that's what gets the clicks. What doesn't get the click is a tutorial on how to make backtests, on how to build those sheets that in the end figure out what historically worked well in the past. The backtest that I often show here on this channel. I still very much enjoy producing this kind of content though. I also share these kinds of sheets, but I don't do it on YouTube. It's rather a small circle. We are less than 100 people that signed up for premium. You also get direct access to me. Feel free to check it out. It's thebitcoinstrategy.com. And so with that knowledge, this chart is much easier to understand. This is the Ethereum correlation coefficient to Bitcoin over a 90-day interval. So you can measure correlation coefficients over several time frames. And look at the correlation coefficient in the early days of Ethereum in 2016, 2017. This was sometimes negative, sometimes close to 0. When Ethereum was just a few millions worth of a coin, it really didn't move that much in tandem with Bitcoin. Now that Ethereum is much, much larger, the correlation coefficient tends to be between 0.8 and 1. So when an altcoin is small and overlooked, you can actually use this to diversify your portfolio. Once it becomes large enough, once it becomes part of the top 100 cryptocurrencies, then it tends to move much more in tandem with Bitcoin and ETH, and you can't really diversify with it in your portfolio. And again, what's the idea of diversification? The idea is that your portfolio is a basket of lowly correlated assets, because then those swings, they might cancel each other out, right? The overall portfolio volatility might go down when you've got assets that are very low in correlation to one another. So if you want to diversify within crypto, not across asset classes, but within crypto, you should do this with very small assets. And here's another way to look at this. Again, this is the performance today of the top 100 cryptocurrencies. A lot of correlation. But let's look at the smaller assets. Here's the top 100. Here's the top 200. So we've got already 3-4 quite nice outliers. Here's the top 300. Not that obvious anymore that it's a negative day. Maybe 10-20% of the assets are outperforming. The top 400. Also much more green. The top 500, maybe here we've almost got a 50-50. And that's on a negative day where everything in the top 100 is red. Does this mean that the general market has zero impact on these small altcoins? Of course it doesn't. There is some impact, but it's less. If you're holding an altcoin that's maybe only 50 million in market cap, you do not have to look that much at what Bitcoin or Ethereum is doing. You do not have to sell that altcoin because you anticipate that Bitcoin or ETH will go down. But that in turn also means that if your altcoin does go down on those days, that it's probably due to the altcoin and not due to the market. The idiosyncratic movements of altcoins, the movements that are specific to the project, are much, much larger for the smaller coin. You can't blame the entire market for your small altcoin losses. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe. I publish videos regularly. A like would be very much appreciated as well. It helps the channel grow. There's also a free Telegram. Link is down below.